Hi, welcome to Psychology Salon. I'm Randy Patterson, and today we're talking about the nature of panic attacks. You may know that the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions of the autonomic nervous system work as a kind of balance. When one is more activated, the other is less so. So you might see them as being in competition with one another, or you could equally see them as being in a kind of harmony. When the sympathetic nervous system is more activated, we tend to call this a stress response, and it involves a wide variety of changes in your body. Normally, it tends to rise fairly gradually, though sometimes it's quite sudden. When something happens in front of you on the highway, for example, it kicks in very quickly. But when it does, it's almost always in response to something that's happening out there in the real world. The car suddenly cuts into our lane and our heart leaps and we breathe quickly and maybe some other stuff happens. But it's no great mystery. How come my heart rate is so high? Well, it's obvious. In a panic attack, the stress response comes on very, very quickly and ramps up to an extremely high point. But often, this isn't an immediate response to something happening out there in the real world. So many panic attacks seem to come from out of the blue, and you can imagine that this is often more scary. What's going on with my body? Is this a heart attack or what? I'll talk more about the natural history of panic attacks and panic disorder in another video, but today I want to focus in on what a panic attack actually feels like, what changes take place. And to do that, I'll use the list of symptoms we use in diagnosing panic. But keep in mind that every single one of these symptoms can also happen in the context of other disorders, so you really can't diagnose yourself based on anything in this video. First, heart-related symptoms, and there are two big factors here. The number of beats per minute rises, so you feel you have a racing heart rate, and if you take your pulse, you can tell that's what's really happening. You may also feel your heart pounding, like it's expanding and contracting more than usual, which is also exactly what's happening. This is an increase in your pulse volume, the amount of blood being expelled from your heart with each beat. You may also have a feeling of your heart missing beats or skipping or fluttering. When we see people with what we suspect are panic attacks in the clinic, we always make sure that they have a good medical screen first, because all of these are things that can be associated with other problems, even though it's often pretty clear from the context what's going on. Now, people really don't like panic attacks, and most find that one or another of those symptoms bothers them more than the other. The heart rate effects are often the ones that make them most anxious, and of course, anxiety makes the heart rate go even higher. This is one of the ways that panic attacks spiral upward. Next, shortness of breath or feelings of smothering. This is a feeling like you can't get enough air into your lungs. What's going on almost always is that you're breathing much faster than usual, but also much more shallowly. So, more breaths per minute, but less air per breath. And the feeling is that you're not getting enough air. But the reality is you're over-breathing. So you tend to spiral faster and faster, which doesn't help and actually brings on some of the other symptoms of panic. Next, chest pain or discomfort. Now, you would think that this is coming from your heart, but not usually. It's more associated with the changes in your breathing. I always ask clients to demonstrate how they feel this, and they usually do this or this. It tends to be high, central, and bilateral, which doesn't necessarily mean it's just a panic attack, but it is consistent with one. And I don't mean to imply that you can't get other kinds of chest pain with panic, but this one seems to be the most common. In all cases, I'm expecting the physician to do at least a rough check of how this person is doing. Next, feeling dizzy or lightheaded or faint, or actually feeling a little unsteady on your feet, like you need to sit down. This is really common, and it's almost always associated with the over-breathing that people are doing. If we can get their breathing back on track, the dizziness goes away. And paresthesias, which are numb or tingling sensations, usually in the extremities, like the hands or feet. Some people get these, many don't. And these two are almost always associated with the changes in breathing. If we deliberately hyperventilate for long enough, and so on, we can usually bring them on. And sometimes people worry that they're having a stroke or a heart attack when they get these, and they're not. Well, what else? Sweating. Not everyone notices that they're sweating more than usual, but most do during a panic attack. And that's a classic symptom of stress activation, especially if it isn't happening during exercise or exertion. And trembling or shaking. Lots of things can cause tremor, but during a panic attack, tremor is really common. It's no accident that people say, I was shaking with fear or quaking in my boots. If you're really stressed, it's reasonably rare to have an absolutely steady hand. Next, a feeling of choking, like your throat is closing in on you. This isn't an allergic or an asthma response, but it can feel like it might be. This is part of why people during anxiety are pulling at their collar or loosening their tie. Feelings of restriction around the neck can be uncomfortable. Next, chills or hot flushes. This can go either way, hot or cold. Some people report these, others don't. And nausea or abdominal distress. Some people feel quite nauseous, and that's often in the moment while the attack is taking place. But sometimes it's in the come down period as an attack is fading. Others feel a tight stomach or stomach pain. So all of those are physical symptoms, but there are psychological symptoms as well. Derealization is reported by some people. This is a feeling like external reality isn't quite real. It's like a movie or something you're watching through a blurry lens. You feel detached from the world around you. Others report depersonalization, which is a feeling of not being yourself in the way that you usually are. It's a detached sense, as though you might be an actor playing yourself rather than actually being yourself. Now, you're aware intellectually that you're still you, but that feeling of inhabiting yourself and being one and the same thing is missing. And then there are fears. One is a fear of dying. Maybe this is a heart attack or a stroke. Maybe this is it. Or maybe you'll just die from a lack of oxygen from not breathing enough. Panic attacks are not lethal, but it can seem like they might be. The interesting thing is that the fear of death often doesn't go away even after you've had dozens of attacks and you've survived every single one of them. Another fear is of losing control over your actions. Maybe you'll scream or cry or fall to the ground right there on the bus, and it'll be really embarrassing. Maybe you'll lose bladder control or poop yourself. These things tend not to happen. This is mostly a social fear. Somehow you'll be publicly humiliated as a result of having this attack. And there's also a fear of, quote, going crazy, meaning that the experience is so extreme that you will lose all mental balance and never regain it. People often tell me their secret worry is that these attacks will ultimately cause them to be hospitalized in a psychiatric facility for the rest of their lives. It's often a considerable relief when they learn that virtually nobody with panic attacks gets hospitalized so much as overnight, let alone for an extended period. So, Those are some of the symptoms of panic. But why do panic attacks occur? When do they happen? And how do individual attacks develop into actual panic disorder? I'll address those questions in another video. Thanks for watching. If you like this kind of thing, click subscribe below. And if you're interested in my books, you can find them at bookstores or through online booksellers. See you again.